There are plenty of brain-dead ways to make money in old school RuneScape, but for the sake of your sanity and the efficient progression of your account, you probably want to kill two birds with one stone and tackle some of the lucrative mid-game bosses. This is not only going to make you bank, but it's going to teach you some of the essential skills that you're going to need to tackle harder content in the future, be that content like the Inferno or the Colosseum for untradeable endgame best-in-slot items, or raids for massive game-changing mega rare drops. Don't let any of the videos by the top level players or guides on the wiki fool you. These are all written by sweats in max gear that don't tackle anything unless they're in the optimal setup. All the content I'm going to be showing you today is achievable and farmable with much more budget-friendly gear. I've got in-depth guides for all of these bosses, so make sure to check them out if you want much more thorough advice on the mechanics and the gear you should be bringing with you. Before we get to the endgame stuff, we're going to need some game knowledge and the gear. That comes with practice and money, and the content I'm going to be talking about today will cover all the bases you need to build upon the solid foundation that we looked at in our beginner's guide to PVM. If anything in this video seems a little bit beyond your comfort zone, maybe check that video out first and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like these, as well as more specific guides to help you get through whatever content you want to tackle next. The mid-game has had so much awesome stuff added in 2024, so we'll be looking at some recent content, but some of the old favourites are still unbelievably consistent money makers and great for your first real boss grind. You'll have plenty of options to choose from depending on what quests you've done and your preferred combat style. Let's get stuck in with the first bit of content that's really going to show you the ropes of what PVM is all about. The Moons of Peril is the spiritual successor to an iconic piece of content in RuneScape, the Barrows. There are 3 bosses that you'll need to tackle. There are a few reasons this content is incredible for the mid-level player. The first being that you need no consumable items to get kills on this boss, meaning the drops you get from the loot chest at the end are pure profit. You can boost your stats and restore health and prayer with the potions and food obtainable in the boss area. You'll be running through caves where you can fish, hunt, collect bugs and replenish your resources, and even refresh your run energy by stopping for a quick cup of tea. Speaking of making pure profit, you can expect to make between 2 and 3 mil per hour. This boss is pretty reliant on getting the unique drops, so hold out until you get some of the big ticket items. Blood Moon Tassets are the priciest drop, sitting at around 11 mil right now. You'll get some steady cash too, trickling in from the herbs, seeds, bones and other materials. As this encounter is broken up into 3 bosses, you're going to be learning so many transferable skills. With the Blue Moon, learning to dodge the tornadoes properly is going to teach you so much about movement and timing. It's also a great demonstration of an interesting quirk in the OSRS running mechanics. When you're walking, you move 1 tile every tick. If you're unfamiliar with the tick system, RuneScape basically registers every input and position every 0.6 seconds. If you're walking, you move 1 tile every 0.6 seconds. If you run, you move 2 tiles and your character is never actually registered as being on the central tile, even though that's where he appears to be in the animation. The True Tile plugin demonstrates this really well. I strongly advise using it to get to grips with this system. You can use this knowledge to your advantage and run through some of the tornadoes that would usually be damaging if you just walk through them. On the Eclipse Moon, using the shield to block the Eclipse Moon's attacks is very similar to using the shield in the Zook fight at the end of the Inferno. I've never actually done the Inferno, but I've tried simulators for practice, and the only real difference I can see is that you're moving in a square instead of a straight line, which I think is actually harder, and that you can't get any attacks on the boss during the shield phase. There is no other mechanic in this game like this that I know of, so it's the best introduction that you're going to get. The Blood Moon has the Blood Jaguars. This has some carryover to the belly bouncing mechanic in the Verzik fight in the Theatre of Blood. It's useful, but Theatre of Blood entry mode is the real secret for learning that fight for sure. Next up, we've got a classic money printer, Vorkath. Vorkath is super consistent, with superior dragon bones being a massive source of the money, but fairly common dragon items, rune items, as well as crafting and fletching materials, herbs, seeds and other bits and bobs boosting up your profit. Expect between 3 and 5 mil per hour depending on your gear and stats. The biggest catch with Vorkath is that it requires Dragon Slayer 2, a fairly tough, long quest, but certainly doable with a mid-game account. I've got a guide on the final boss, Galvek, so if you're scared of taking him on, make sure to check that out. Once you've got the quest out of the way though, you should have no trouble with Vorkath. If you've already been tackling great beginner bosses like Scurious and Amoxicliatal, you should have had the exposure to most of the required mechanics, turning your prayer back on when it gets switched off, dodging the falling fireballs, all having massive crossover from these earlier bosses. The new main thing you can learn from this fight is the Woox walk, invented by the man himself to keep damage consistent whilst on the move. There are both ranged and melee methods, but as a quick overview I'll demonstrate the melee method as I find it easier to demonstrate what's going on. There are plenty of YouTubers better than me that can show you the range method. During the acid phase, you'll need to keep moving consistently to avoid the fireballs. Depending on your weapon speed, you'll be clicking away from the boss and then clicking back on the boss with the right timing. You'll need to make sure that you click away again as soon as your true tile touches the boss, so that you don't get held on this spot for any length of time. If you get held there, you'll get hit by the fireball. This is a great transferable skill at every boss where you'll need to move and attack at the same time, and it's a great place to learn it because you'll have that instant feedback of getting slapped by the fireballs if you mess it up. It's a really great skill to have at the next boss I'll be showing you, the Phantom Muspah. The profit range is similar to Vorkath, between 3 and 5 million per hour, but it's a lot less consistent and reliant on uniques, but not so much as the Moons. You'll be holding out for those Venitus shards to really make the big money. For mid-level players, gear switching is the main skill you're going to be brushing up on in this fight. In max gear with mega rare weapons, you can range or mage this boss down, but realistically, you're going to want to bring both combat styles. Organising your inventory to make switches easy and practicing those fast clicks is essential in the end game. This boss will certainly punish you if your clicks aren't quick enough. Slow switches means slow kills, which means more damage taken, and the more likely you are to die or run out of supplies. Keeping with the speed as the theme of this boss, you're going to need super fast prayer switches to protect from the hard-hitting magic attack and rapid movement to avoid the ground spikes. A mechanic that is fairly unique to Muspah is kiting him around the room in his melee phase. This is often used on older, tankier bosses like General Brador, or whilst going for certain combat achievements like in the Fight Caves or Inferno, but it's a bit of a niche skill. Knowing how to move monsters around when they have you targeted is definitely a useful tool to have in your toolbox. Next we've got another classic moneymaker, Zora. It's a great mix of both consistent rewards and some pricey unique drops. You can expect around 2 to 4 million per hour here. Similar to Muspah, you'll need to range and mage switch for a mid-level account. It's another great place to practice those speedy switches. However, I think the main takeaway from Zora is that even though you can avoid a lot of the damage with the correct prayers and movement, there are still phases where you can get comboed out pretty hard. Being aware of the boss's max hit and just how quickly it can kill you is essential in every RuneScape boss. It sounds obvious, but when you know a boss can hit you for 40, sitting below 40 HP is probably a bad idea. Due to the speed of Zora's attacks and the fact that you can't block everything with prayer, it really keeps you on your toes at managing your resources. Once you've mastered these bosses, the next bunch I'd advise to tackle are the gang from Desert Treasure 2. Duke is super easy once you get the hang of him, and the other 3 bosses are tough, but there's one for each combat style, so no matter which skill you've invested your time and money into, there should be one for you. These are on the top tier of mid-game bosses, branching into the end game. I'll likely be making a video on how these bosses, and other similar ones, will help you break into the end game soon. I've got some more general tips for you, but first, if you've made it this far, please drop me a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. If you've got any topics you'd like my opinions on, guys you'd like to see, or any feedback whatsoever, let me know in the comments section below. I think the best way to tackle any content is to watch a few quick videos and just give it a go. You'll probably die a few times, but the cost of death is nothing in comparison to the money you'll be making once you master the mechanics and get that sweet loot. Don't let guides put you off. Most of the pro players will be recommending the best gear, but there's also a few creators like myself that will give you reasonable options on budget. Too many people don't even try content because they haven't got the perfect gear yet, when in reality, the best way to get that gear is to earn the money doing the bosses sub-optimally. There is an intended progression ladder, with bosses like Amoxicliatal and Scurious being great for learning the essential techniques, and the bosses covered in this guide great for developing them further. But I didn't use these to learn, and neither did the people who've been around a long time. You can throw yourself at any content and pick it up with enough patience. But yeah, having done content with similar mechanics before certainly makes getting up to speed a little less painful. Thanks for sticking around, I'll see you next time.